Hey everyone, and welcome to another GameXplain discussion. This time, I'm not your host. Instead, this discussion will be handled by NintenDaan and Jon NomComms Cartright as they give their early impressions on Dragon Quest Builders for the Nintendo Switch, as both received an early European copy. So let's let them get right to it.
So yes, we are discussing here Dragon Quest Builders. I am Dan, that is Jon.
Hi.
So yes, we're here to talk about Dragon Quest Builders, which is coming to the Switch early February. We've both been playing it quite a bit. I in fact already finished the game, but I already had the game a little bit longer.
You had a nice little Christmas with it, didn't you?
Yeah, I had a Christmas with it. It was basically my Christmas game. But you started early January, you still got pretty decently far. Like, you got the first 2 chapters in, right?
I'm in the middle of chapter 3 at the moment. And these chapters are pretty long. They're, I guess they're kind of like self-contained games within themselves.
Right. But I think we should start from the top here. And, there are likely a good number of people who played it on PlayStation 4, and we'll get into that. What this version exactly makes unique. But we should first likely explain what Dragon Quest Builders exactly is. So, Dragon Quest Builders takes place in a sort of weird version of Elfgard, which is the world of the original Dragon Quest. I say weird, basically because this is a world where the Dragon Lord actually destroys the world and throws it into darkness.
Mm-hmm.
And the humans were basically forced to live besides like the ruins of the destroyed towns with nowhere else to go. It is here that you jump in as the legendary builder who needs to stop the chaos and be the hero that the people deserve. Though you are not allowed to be called a hero, and this embodied voice at the beginning says you are not a hero, so you are only sort of a hero. Basically, your goal is to build the world up from the get-go, rebuild towns from the original Dragon Quest. Once again, a great love letter to that game. What makes it very different from that original game is that it actually carries over like the current Dragon Quest writing style. Like, it has some really witty characters and it pushes you forward for the most part, I feel.
Absolutely, the writing is incredible. Really witty as well. Like, there's lots of great comedic timing, and it's really self-aware too. So in this, your character has quite a blank face, and there's one line where there's an NPC talking to you and they're telling you a secret, and they say something like, "Don't be shocked," and then they tell you their secret, and of course your character just has like a blank face, and then they call you out on that. It's really self-aware, it's really funny, and it's a great use of that template. And I think a lot of people might go into this and think it's just Minecraft, but with a Dragon Quest skin, and that's really not it at all.
No.
I'd say it's Minecraft with a purpose. It's such a well-structured game.
I would say it's Dragon Quest with a quest line.
Yeah, that makes sense too. It's far more structured than your usual Minecraft sort of game. And it definitely takes cues from both Minecraft and Dragon Quest, while not really favouring either side. See, I'm not a huge Minecraft fan. I've never really gotten into that game, but I absolutely adore Dragon Quest Builders. I think it's a remarkable game. And it manages to feel like an RPG while still being that sort of material collecting game.
I still feel it's very different from Minecraft, where there's a lot more focus on that material collecting and what you exactly do with it with the workbench, because it's basically not just blocks that you build, it's things that you craft, like the smallest things from beds to flowers to chests to anything. You basically need to build up the world from scratch.
And what I really like as well is all your materials are out there, and sometimes it's just up to you going out and finding them. And most of them don't respawn, so you always have to try and find different parts of the world to find these materials. So say you need to find some leaves. You may know where a batch of them are, but eventually you ran out of them, and you have to go and explore further and find out where they are exactly. Right. So it's definitely this great mix of resource management and world building, and it works so well.
For sure. It really starts into its own when you get going, because once again you build up that town from zero, and the humans will come towards you and they search for refuge. You build up the first houses, you give them a place to stay, and as you build on that, it sort of forms that the places that you might remember from those older games. And even if you don't, you get really the feeling that you're building up a world through the eyes that Dragon Quest Builders gives you. Even funnier that the inhabitants even know what the word build is, so you even have to learn that to them.
Mm-hmm.
What is important to know is, from what we're saying, it's not unreasonable to think that the game guides you through the experience, and it certainly can if you want to, and you wouldn't be wrong in doing so. I mean, your character basically stays the same for the majority of the game, and the materials are the changing factor here. It doesn't also exactly help that you're basically guided to all of the main quest destinations. Just a big queue on the map, like basically stamped towards you, and you basically know where you need to go. Though that being said, especially as you move along, there is a good chunk of side quests in every single chapter, and there are plenty of things that you can do along the way. And I would say that there are 4 locations in this game, 4 chapters, and each of these chapters takes about 10 hours.
Mm-hmm. And they're all very self-contained too, so you can't take materials from one chapter and bring them into another. It's like a point of no return, apart from you can return to previous chapters. Just all your materials are not compatible between the 2 zones.
No, they're not. No.
You're essentially building up 4 different places and making your mark on the world. These 4 places are very independent, and they all have their own kind of twists too. So the first one is just sort of your standards kind of area. The second one is more about, I guess it introduces status effects and sort of gets you into like a nursing kind of area too. And then the third area is more about survival, where you kind of have to, you rely less on food and other resources like that. So it's interesting to see how the difficulty kind of goes up from area to area.
Yeah, and also the ways that you get like different materials is also very different between those chapters. Like in the first world, it's pretty straightforward how you get your basic materials, basically from picking up and roaming around the area. But especially if you get, for example, to the mining area, mining has some major disadvantages for building up that town, and you need to go out of your way to find the things that you need. So there is a real good balance there to keep you engaged along the way, and the various types in the areas ensures that you also sometimes really need to think outside of the box, or really need to think about where you need to go, and that makes that fun. I think that aspect of it really came to its own as soon as you started discovering it. But overall though, you can see this as a linear game, but you don't have to.
And we haven't even really touched on the free building aspect of the game too. So once you finish chapter 1, you unlock this area where you can just do what you want to do. You can just go out into this very free open world and just make your own things. So yeah, there are 4 chapters which are around 10 hours long each, but then there's this entire area for you to do what you like, so you're really looking at an incredibly huge game here.
Yeah.
And they've even added some new stuff in the Switch version too, which we'll get onto a bit more later.
Right.
But yeah, there is so much to do in this game.
That free building mode, the Terra Incognita, as it is called, it locks after the first chapter, but it will keep expanding as you wrap up more of these chapters. And there are no enemies, there's no worry about anything that you need to keep in mind. It's a pure creative outlet. And even though I feel that some things in that specific way are a bit limited than, say, Minecraft, it's also a lot more straightforward than something like Minecraft, because you basically put a block down and that's it. It's not hard to understand, which I feel is the way Dragon Quest Builders just works. Outside of that though, and outside of like keep doing the tasks and keeping yourself occupied, there's also like combat you need to keep in mind while exploring the regular world. And it's not typical Dragon Quest combat in the way that you have various attacks, you decide them from a menu and go along the way. Like I said, your character stays basically the same, so you need additional armor or tools to get yourself through maps and difficult areas. And this can be very tricky and annoying at moments, but for the most part, it's basically spamming a button and getting the job done. Where it becomes annoying though, and this is me being completely honest, I didn't enjoy the bosses all that much. Like at the end of a chapter you get a boss where you have to make a unique weapon that requires some really rare materials. And you also need a specific way in how you need to defeat them, which I think adds a little bit of a frustration factor to it. I've had more deaths than I would like to admit with that stuff, and I personally feel that time was better spent on the next step of the journey.
Yeah, I think I can agree with you entirely there. Combat is definitely the weakest part of the game for me, but it's what you get from combat though. You're still mining resources even when you're whacking enemies. So you aren't necessarily hitting a slime just to get experience, because you don't get experience.
For sure, yeah.
It's to get what they have for you. But yeah, I understand entirely what you mean. There isn't really that much satisfaction from fighting enemies. They kind of mix it up by giving you a spin attack and other kind of things like that, but it's just not really all that engaging. And that's definitely showcased best with the boss battles, where it's just kind of hit or miss.
I think the bosses is where it was the worst for me. Like, I could deal with the minions just across the world, basically because you have the purpose of getting those materials. I just think it is just way more annoying with those bosses because it feels like there's very little payoff for it.
Yeah, I agree.
Outside of that, I think, gosh, we covered most of what is in this game. To talk about the Nintendo Switch version, it looks pretty good. I mean, it's not the most breathtaking thing ever, but it gets the job done well. The game is entirely built out of voxels, which adds to that retro look and that idea that you are in Elfgard. Regardless of how you're playing the game, you can pretty clearly see what you're doing, even in handheld mode. I would say that what annoyed me a little bit is when you get into a tight place and it becomes this almost first-person camera.
Yep.
And this is where you really don't know exactly where you're going, and it feels extremely cramped. Like, otherwise, like it mostly uses an overhead or first or third-person camera, and that works excellent. I just feel that specific instance, it just is a major annoyance.
Yeah, I built a building which was 3 blocks high, and I gave it a ceiling, and then as soon as you go in, you just cannot see a thing. So the only way to really have a ceiling is to build like a huge structure. But I played the PS4 version prior to playing this version to get a little idea of how it compares. And really, it kind of looks the same. PS4's a bit sharper.
Sure, yeah.
But the two versions are very comparable. But that being said, it is quite a simple-looking game on all platforms. I think that kind of works with its structure of everything being a material. But yeah, I think this is a very capable port, and it definitely holds up in both resolution and frame rate. I can't really recall any instances of, major frame rate drops anyway.
No, there was no frame rate drops as far as I have noticed. I would say, and this is another thing that sort of annoyed me presentation-wise, I felt that the music was nothing to write home about.
So I quite liked a few tracks. It's quite small in its scope. There's only a couple of tracks in the entire game.
Yeah, I mean it's fine in smaller chunks, but after a while I found myself just putting on different music with a bunch of headphones.
I liked most of the Overworld themes. Most of the sound themes are quite relaxing, but because there's only a few of them, they get quite grating after a while. Because the chapters are about 10 hours each, you maybe have 2 to 3 tracks that you'll be hearing a lot.
Yeah.
And while, I like them a lot, but I can see what you mean. That is definitely a lot to listen to for 10 hours straight.
And I found myself playing for 2 to 3 hours, so you immediately notice it after an hour or two.
Also, one thing with the PS4 version I noticed was the camera's actually a bit different in that version. Or at least I couldn't figure out how to replicate it on the Switch anyway. On Switch, if you click down on the right analog stick, you have 3 different camera zoom outs. You have the really close one, the middle range one, and the far out one.
Yeah.
And I couldn't seem to be able to do that on PS4 unless I was missing something.
Oh, really? Huh.
Yeah, it just seemed to have that one fixed one. So correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I couldn't figure out how to do that there. So that may be new.
Could very well be. As this is the Nintendo Switch version, you can take it with you anywhere, which is a nice touch, and it gives you the full Dragon Quest Builders experience. Honestly, beyond that though, there isn't much that they added to it. There are no touchscreen controls to speak of, and I don't think there are any other unique features that I really noticed. At the very least, there is some original content. You can ride the Great Saber Cub and get some additional retro-styled customization options, which are nice, but in the grand scheme, they don't add that much. It's something, I suppose. It doesn't exactly add to the value of what this game already offers.
Yeah, this isn't really something to rebuy the game for. And
No.
the Great Saber Cub isn't exactly a something that you'll be using the entire game. It's a very neat little thing to help exploration get a bit faster. Yeah, but as you said, there isn't really a whole lot new to this version of Dragon Quest Builders. It's just kind of a neat switchboard. And it's a very neat switchboard.
Yeah, for sure. But I did expect a little bit of touchscreen connectivity, maybe for handheld mode, because the bottom row seemed ripe for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it would have definitely helped with the item management. I don't really see why they wouldn't have done that. But this is definitely a much better Dragon Quest port than Dragon Quest Heroes, for sure.
Yeah, Dragon Quest Warriors, I would personally call it. They have not done that port justice. I don't know if they're ever gonna go back and update that thing, but they still haven't, so I'm wondering if they ever will. Overall though, I would say that Dragon Quest Builders is currently the best experience that you can have on the Switch.
That is high praise.
Well, the best experience you can have in that series, of course. Like, there is of course Dragon Quest X in Japan, and of course Dragon Quest Heroes, but I think this is the best one so far.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Certainly until Dragon Quest XI arrives, whenever that is. You don't feel overwhelmed as much, and you always have clear directions of where you need to go. And you can lose yourself in it with those side quests, but overall, I think it's a pretty straightforward game. There's some stuff that's a hassle, but yeah, overall, I have a good time, and that's what matters in the end.
As I said at the beginning of the discussion, I'm not a huge Minecraft guy, but I absolutely love this game. And I think it's adding that structure that does it for me. I'm not really someone who can just go off and just do whatever. I like to have that kind of guidance or some kind of thing to do. And Dragon Quest Builders absolutely enables that. And it really resonates with me. But I think one question some people may have is whether they should hold out for Builders 2, which has been announced for Switch. And to that, I would say Builders 1 isn't really something that you really refine upon. I mean, they definitely will refine upon it, but it's its own thing with its own story and own quest line.
Yeah.
So if you're worried about that, Builders 2 will definitely improve upon the first one. But I think this definitely has its merits with its own storyline. It's just like an RPG, really. Like, would you miss out on Final Fantasy 1 because Final Fantasy 2 is coming out? I don't think so.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same way. So, where can people find you?
They can find me on Twitter at NomComms, where I tweet about things and games and stuff. And they can also find me on my channel NomComms, in addition to GameXplain, this place that you're watching right now.
Same thing here, GameXplain. Also, my own stuff, which you find at NintenDaan on Twitter. That's NintenDaan. And yeah, there's some additional places that I do stuff on, but you can find links to all of that right there. And yeah, that was our discussion. Hope you enjoyed it. And stay tuned for GameXplain for a lot more on Dragon Quest Builders and other things gaming too. Thank you so much. Bye bye.